Theo, you're live now.
Oh, I'm live. I'm good to go. Okay, I
You're good to
wasn't
go.
sure if I was waiting for you. All right, awesome. Well, hey everybody, it's Theo here. Glad to be here. Hope everyone's having an awesome day and joining the Value UX conference. I know you guys are probably tired. Lots of great talks, and of course, huge shout out to Dale and Naresh for creating this awesome conference for y'all. Best knowledge in the industry, right, about user experience, helping your business succeed, and also just helping you learn all the latest and greatest tips and tricks from all the greatest UXers. So my presentation today is going to be on from chaos to clarity, strategic journey maps in complex B2B ecosystems. So what does that mean? Lots of things going on in your business, right? Lots of different teams kind of talking. How do you create that clarity by understanding that customer journey, but also looking at it particularly from the B2B ecosystem area. So again, huge shout out to Dale and also Naresh on running this conference. Now let's dive into all things. And I'm going to start with a quick introduction about me so you guys can get a quick rundown about who I am, and then we'll dive right in. So if you guys don't know me, I am a UX researcher by day and an influencer by night. So went to SUNY Oswego, was the first person to present a publication on the international stage in Ireland. 7 years of user experience, research experience, Sony Music Entertainment, Apple, Microsoft, and today I lead strategy as an associate director at Pace Communications. I love Pace, great team, awesome place, really excited to be here. Outside of the UX lab, again, I've rolled over 30 perfect 300 games. Big bowler here. I do run a YouTube channel outside of my work in UX. I have over 79,000 subscribers, and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I also have 5 cats named after Greek gods and goddesses, because even my pets have that lore. So, a little bit about me. Awesome. So let's dive into the presentation. Let's get started. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process. We're going to dive right in. And then there might be some instances here where I tell people, hey, raise your hand if this has happened to you. And if you can do that, that'd be awesome. Sweet. So very first thing we're going to take a look at is looking at the illusion of alignment. So have you guys ever sat in a meeting where sales, product, maybe support described 3 different customer problems and thought, are we arguing about the same journey, or are we talking about the same journey? So let me take you back to a project I kind of led in one of my roles for a global SaaS platform. So we spent around 6 months building a new onboarding roadmap, right? Onboarding nomination, right? People come in, they check out, go through a process, right? Lots of different teams, lots of different things happening at once. Every team thought they were solving for the same problem, but in reality, they weren't really aligned on the problem itself. So you can see the product manager. We thought the users were struggling because this feature was too complicated. The support lead says, no, the real issue is they can't even get past the IT approvals. They never reach the feature. Then we have the UX team going, scratch on head, right? And then even the sales director maybe might say, actually, our concern is users don't understand the value proposition until renewal time. So here we were, right? 3 different teams, 3 completely different interpretations of the customer journey. And yet, each of us was confident we were right. So that's the illusion of alignment. And trust me, this is exactly where strategic journey maps save millions of wasted efforts. So again, if you have a chance, let me know. I don't know if it'll work here, but quick audience poll. Who has created a journey map that never got used? Create this beautiful journey map for your org, and then it just sat there and nothing happened to it. Quick show of hands. So I don't know if it's working or not, but again, very common in the industry. Create these complex journey maps, but then how do you use the information from that journey map and have it be effective for your business? So let's turn journey maps from wall art into those decision-making engines. The myth of the sticky note journey map. So let's talk about one of the biggest myths in UX and product strategy, the belief that a wall full of sticky notes is a journey map. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar. Yes, you could do journey maps with sticky notes. Not saying it's not a thing. But when it comes to B2B and looking at the complexity levels, right, and those layering models, it's really important to take a look at, the different types of journey maps and how they can be effective for your business. So, well, Ben, in this kind of workshop, the music's playing, people are standing, grooving around, right? People are acting enthusiastically, doing those post-it notes on the wall. It could be in person, it could be remote, and for it's about 2 hours, it feels like alignment. But here's the uncomfortable truth, right? Most journey maps fail not because they're wrong, but because they're too shallow. Always want more. How come this isn't here? How come this isn't here? So, great example. By the way, I just pulled these online. HP, they use this heart of the customer, B2B. So B2B versus the B2C. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. But you can see the complexity levels. I know based on my screen here, you can see there's like different users, there's different phases in the journey, there's empathy, there's opportunity, there's where the team came in, there's the operational layers, right? So this is what a real enterprise journey looks like. So it's not really, it's not awareness, consideration to purchase, it's more procurement, approvals, legal, security assessments, IT enablement, internal politics even, right? Is there a blocker that we're not aware of? Looking at power dynamics, departmental handoffs that stall for weeks. So when we put sticky notes on a wall and call it a journey map, we're not really mapping the journey. We're almost kind of mapping our assumptions. Again, not saying that that's not how to do a journey map. When you're looking at the complex and the complexities of the B2B ecosystems, looking at a good structure and facilitation of these workshops and making sure the journey doesn't expose dependencies, blockers, and ownerships and emotional triggers, it's not just a strategy tool, it's a theater, right? So if your journey map wouldn't make your CFO or your head of support and your VP of sales nervous, it's not deep enough, right? So our journey isn't to make them look pretty. Of course, presentation matters, right? But it's also to surface operational truth. And when we do, alignment stops being a meeting and it becomes a mandate. So, we talked about this a couple minutes ago, right? So, journey mapping in B2B doesn't really equal journey mapping in B2C. Common misconception. Journey map is not a journey art, or journey map, I'm sorry, at least not in the way people think. So in B2C, one person decides you can track emotions, motivations, maybe a linear path or for a purchase, but marketing owns the story and it's relatively straightforward. But enterprise B2B, that's a whole different beast entirely. Having my fair take of being in industry for a while, I've been able to kind of see it from a different lens. Of course, one decision maker compared to multi-threaded decision chains is really important for compare and contrast. So in B2B, there's rarely a single person, signing the check. There's procurement teams, IT, legal, end users, executive, all moving in parallel. And a lot of times, for instance, in my background, I'm working at Microsoft. My last role at Microsoft, I was there for about 3.5 years, right? The complexity and layering models, all the different programs, right? When procurement, and of course, incubation. There's all these different layering, right? What does that look like? Very complex structural methods and how the org is settled, but also when you go through creating acquisition and launching products, there's a lot of things to take a look at, right? So it's not just fear of missing out on excitement over a shiny feature. It's whether IT will block that feature, or whether legal approves those contracts, or whether sales can convince finance that, hey, this is the right thing. These are all political, procedural, and very real blockers. So unlike B2C, the purchase doesn't end at the checkout. Renewal cycles, expansions, and upsells are where the real friction lies. Upsell opportunities, looking at that very heavily in my last role, had a really good chance to kind of dive deep into that system area at Microsoft. So again, where does the real dollars are lost if your journey map is shallow? Again, complexity. It's a lot there. So looking at, of course, this marketing owned versus, shared across products, sales, ops, and legal. So, and forget the idea that marketing alone owns the journey. In enterprise, everyone owns a piece, and misalignment anywhere costs money and time. So, again, in B2B, a journey map isn't just an empathy tool. It's an operational blueprint, a single source of truth for alignment, accountability, and strategic investment. So, the next section here, so now we know why B2B journey maps are different, right? The question becomes, When do we use them? And when are they the wrong tool for the job? So again, in B2B, a journey map isn't just an empathy tool. It's an operational blueprint, single source of truth. So really great quote here. Again, so taking a look at that, holistic kind of aspect of the journey map from the B2B perspective and how it applies to the business. Awesome. Let's get tactical for a moment, shall we? When are journey maps the answers? So use journey maps when you need to align siloed teams around a shared reality, when product support, sales, and ops all think they're solving different problems. Journey map forces the single version of the truth. Use them to identify service gaps across fragmented ownership. The blockers that kill adoption, slow onboarding, or create friction in renewals aren't always obvious, right? So they live in handoffs and dependencies. And critically, we use them to prioritize investments that actually move the needle. So cost reduction, churn prevention, or even acquisition impact. If your map doesn't tie, to dollars or measurable outcomes, it's just a decoration. Got to be able to apply that knowledge, right? Bring it to the business. So when journey maps are not the answer. So on the flip side, so don't reach out for a journey map when you're trying to solve for a UI level issue. So that's usability testing, right? We got usability testing, to kind of solve that. Don't reach out for one when there's no executive sponsor or cross-functional adoption plan. You'll spend months making the map pretty, and then it'll sit there. Nothing will happen. We don't want that, right? We want it to be actionable. We want these maps to be a strategic influence on leadership, but also on the organization. And don't use it if the company just wants an artifact or a colorful wall chart. So again, we talk about, utilizing those maps for the right purpose. And again, remember, a journey map with accountability is just wall art. So strategy isn't just a decoration, it's a mandate. And journey maps, when done right, make that mandate impossible to ignore. So now we're going to move into the next section. So now we know that when and why to map, right? Mapping is always important, but now let's break down enterprise grade journey map actually looks like, the layers, the dependencies, the emotional triggers, and the aesthetic. So let's talk shop. So some of the frameworks that I've used, it's great to be able to be here at this conference, letting everybody have this knowledge, be able to kind of utilize this, right? And be able to kind of use it for their business. Again, huge shout out to the team here from Value UX for letting me share some of these insights. So we have this journey mapping framework. So I don't map journeys for decoration. I map them to kind of drive those executive decisions, right? So, and the way I do that is through this framework we have here. So we have business outcome first, right? Looking at that. We have the 3-layer mapping model. What does that look like? And of course, dark matter reveal. Dark matter? What's that? No, it's not just a Call of Duty camo. It's a term. Yes, nerds align, Call of Duty players. Data validation, right? Making sure the data is nice and clean. Design it. How are you going to work with your UX and product team to create these beautiful journey maps, right? And then, of course, actionable outputs and the proof of impact. How are you going to get those tough stakeholders to move the needle? How are you going to move the needle with those tough stakeholders? I apologize. All right, let's dive in. All right, anchor and outcomes, not personas. So most teams kick off journey mapping with personas. And that's fine. Personas are useful for empathy, but let's be real. Personas don't unlock budget, right? Personas don't get engineering to shift the roadmap. Personas don't wake leadership up in the morning. So business outcomes do. So I don't start with who are we mapping. I start with what must we change. So instead of saying, let's map our onboarding experience, which kind of sounds like a design activity, which is fine. Remember, placement of context matters on what you're trying to achieve in the business. Now, if I was to look at a journey map, I would look at it in a different tone. Reduce onboarding churn by 20%. So that one shift changes the tone immediately, right? So suddenly, it's not just a UX exercise, it's a revenue retention initiative, right? So stakeholders, they stop debating colors, features, and they start asking, ooh, look at this. Where are we actually losing people? How fast can we fix that? Now you're in the domain of impact, not theory, right? Numbers are really helpful for those stakeholders. They like to see those numbers. Again, outcomes tell you why this matters now. And if you don't lock in the why in your journey map, that becomes decoration instead of direction. So remember that. So step one, simple. Don't map for clarity, map for change. And change only happens when the goal is undeniable. So let's move into the next part. Step two. So 3-layer mapping model that I really like to use, and we'll actually have a demonstration here in a little bit. Most journey maps stop at the surface level. They show what users are feeling, thinking, or doing, and that's useful. But in B2B, emotion isn't what slows down the deal. Internal friction does. In enterprise environments, the customer experience is the visible layer. The real blockers are buried underneath, which is why I don't build flat journey maps. I build those really strategic layer journey maps when you have all the exceptional time to actually create those maps with all the data involved, right? So layer one, the experience layer. What does the customer feel and do, right? So looking at the positive, the negative emotions, they click what they expect. Where are they confused? What emotions are they experiencing? Anxiety, frustration, excitement, could be good, doesn't have to be bad, or even distrust in the product. Most maps stop right here and declare victory. But looking at the B2B aspect, right? This layer doesn't alone tell you why things are happening. It just tells you, okay, they're happening, cool, right? We look at the second layer, operational layer. What internal teams and systems are doing behind the scenes? This is where things get real, right? Of that customer action. What team enables this moment, right? What tool powers it? What SLA governs it, right? So for example, a customer submits onboarding documents, right? But internally, security has to review that. Legal has to approve it. IT has to give provisional access. Sales ops has to trigger a license, right? Suddenly, that one step is actually 3 or 4, right? Again, looking at the operational layer, and now stakeholders see themselves on the map too. So more importantly, they could see where responsibilities overlap or disappear entirely. So the dependency layer, this kind of the one area that no one talks about maybe. This is like the invisible gravity that slows everything down, that dark matter. We'll talk about that in a second, right? Approval hierarchies, contract language, compliance reviews. It's not emotional structure. It's not emotional. It's structural, right? So here's the magic. So the moment you visualize this layer, ownership and friction becomes undeniable. You could say, oh, I didn't know legal was a bottleneck. There you go, right? Mapping the right things really goes a long way. Closing punchline here just to kind of tell you guys. So when someone says we already have a journey map, my question is which layer, right? Is that an emotional layer? If it covers operations, now we're designing for reality, right? But if we're just looking at dependencies, now we're really driving change. So yeah, you ask like dark matter, right? What's dark matter? Um, so every enterprise journey doesn't fail at the feature level, right? It dies in what I call in the dark matter, and I've been able to kind of look at a bunch of different journey maps and, my research in the last 7 years. So these are the forces that never show up in a traditional journey map, right? The ones that actually control a lot of the velocity, so procurement delays, right? So legal deadlines, just kind of taking hold on certain things, security reviews, or even my personal favorite, executive turf wars. You want to own the decision, but nothing moves at all, right? So just a lot of politics. So these are the real blockers. And yeah, most journey maps pretend they don't exist. So if something slows you down, it goes on the map. I don't care if it's emotional, political, contractual, because if we don't make the invisible visible, we can't design for it, and the roadmap will crash into every time. Susie asked the question, what is the difference between a journey map and a service blueprint? So when I look at a service blueprint, I look at that more of the omnidirectional movements, right? Looking at information architecture, right, and how that kind of moves, left to right, of course, or top-down model, depends on how you're looking at it. I see the journey map as an area for all the opportunities, all the dependencies, right, all those different things intertwined within the business, and you're creating, of course, opportunities, right, for those different areas, not just for the business, but for a user experience. So I have built some service design, of course, maps in the past with my teams. Business processes. So I know just for the sake of time, guys, I'm going to have to move on here. I don't want to make sure I can get through all my slides. So business processes, well, we'll get into this in a minute. I actually have a structural model that I'm going to show you guys how to design the map, and I could talk about that here in a minute. Great questions, by the way. Appreciate y'all. So step 4 is validating data, not opinions. So a journey map built on assumptions is storytelling. So again, a journey map built on the hard data, that's evidence, and evidence gets the buy-in, right? So when I build the journey map, I don't just write users get stuck here. Back that with some data, right? Data analyst team or data analytics team, like what data can you gather, right? So they're doing a lot of these journey maps. It's about adding the qual, the quant, the triangulation, telling the story, telling the holistic story, but adding those data things, right? So 37% of support tickets mentioned waiting on those IT approval, right? Sales lost 4 deals because legal took longer than procurement windows, right? Analytics shows 75% drop off between account creation and first login. Adoption is the problem. It's like, or it's actually an activation problem. So it helps us kind of just look at things a little bit differently. Or I even layer kind of indirect quotes from users on those internal teams, right? Because nothing cuts through debate like reality, right? So, and a good little quote here, a little fact that I kind of found, 43% of organizations validate their customer journey maps with real data. So only 43%. I mean, it's still quite a bit, right? But, you want to be able to kind of validate a lot of the assumptions made, right? Make sure the data is valuable, because if you're, creating a lot of these assumptions or practices, right? And again, taking a step back, assuming that you've done all your primary and secondary research, right? The data is sound, doing a good method, user interviews, right? Walking through flows, doing your data dump. That really matters too, right, guys? So it's like getting the information beforehand, being able to stack up that information to create these beautiful journey maps is extremely important. We're going to move into that here in a second, and talk a little bit about, the actual structure of the journey map and how you bring your design team together. Design it, right? Who doesn't love a nice little design session or workshop with your design team? So let's talk about everything here. So once we got all the data, that's when you bring in UX and product to shape the map visually. But here's the key. We don't just hand them requirements, we design it together. Journey map isn't just a diagram, it's a story. So let's talk about it, right? So first we define, and this is all fictional, by the way, all these examples are fictional, but closely related to a project I did in one of my roles. So first we define the journey stages, the macro flow, right? So not too many, not too vague, just enough to try to track the information. So the journey stage kind of looks at, of course, what are those main areas and stages in the journey. We have those moments in the journey, right? So in that onboarding entry point, there might be a sales engagement, there might be an eligibility verification. And second part, right? Look at the validation of data. It might be some eligibility reports, and there might be some communication there between different teams. So when we zoom in, looking at those touch points and conversations, this is where friction becomes visible. How do we map that? So again, description of the journey, just going a little bit deeper, right? Looking at the human language, no jargon, no acronyms, doesn't feel real, people will not engage with it, right? So again, quick examples here to kind of take a peek at. And we have those different layers that we talked about from before. So how do we kind of pop those on here and make them work, right? So everyone's kind of familiar with those journey maps, looking at the empathies, right? So we have that experience layer. That's where you map the pain points, frustrations, emotions. This is where the empathy lives within that user journey. The operational layer, looking at teams that are involved, right? So let's reveal who's actually behind the moment, which teams, which systems. Accountability starts to show up here, whether teams like it or not. So moving into that, the dark matter layer, the dependencies. So the forces no one talks about, but everyone feels. Procurement, legal, security, politics. We put it all on the board because if it blocks progress, it belongs to the journey. And then finally, opportunities for business. Now, framing here is really important too, right? So you could say that, let's fix this, or we can do this by doing this. Cool, but is there a way to actually measure a lot of those opportunities? So for, of course, looking at actionable plans, right, and really moving a needle, it's kind of looking at it in a word of kind of business impact. So we don't just say it's broken, right? We might say, like, if we fix this, we reduce churn by X%, or unblock adoption, or speed approval up by 2 weeks, etc., right? So again, framing those different ways is really important for the business. So this is where UX shifts from design support to strategic leadership. So when designers and PMs help visualize the truth, they also get to help share and shape the future. So turn insights into tiered action plans. Cool. So we met with the design team. We had a chance to kind of put everything together, be able to kind of create these beautiful things. We have one question here. What about business processes? So can you be a little bit more elaborate on that? So you mentioned business processes. Let me see here. I'm going to bring this back to here. So if I was to look at business processes within this journey map, right? It just really depends. So I mean, and not saying there's not one way to do all. Of course, a journey map. This is like some of the stuff that I've done in the past in my roles, right? So if I was looking at a business process and how it affects things, I might put that. I kind of would tie that up with maybe the operational layer. Of course, put it in the dark matter as well. Let me see. Are they part of the journey map or you receive them from another team? Yeah. So something that, of course, I could be here for another hour, just kind of talking about how we gather the data, right? So looking at business processes, right? Really meeting with those stakeholders, right? Understanding the different areas of the business and understanding how their team works. What does that look like, right? So for instance, if this business process, right, was about onboarding, right? You're trying to get new customers, or you're in a B2B system, right? You're trying to get some new customers to onboard, right? Get them eligible for the program, right? You're looking at the business process that's part of that. Well, for the business process, right, you might work with 3 different teams, right, within that process. What are those teams doing and what tools are they doing, throughout that process as well? And then you look at it from both, if you're in B2B, right? A lot of times you have like the partner side, which is like those clients that you're selling products to, but then they have that lower model, which is the customers that they're selling their product to. Depends, right, on the business you're in and how those layers work. And of course, the, blockades or the silos that might happen in those processes. So I try to do my best to kind of, investigate the business and all areas of operational process to make sure that all the teams are aligned so that you're understanding where those operational layers lie and the business processes are. Because if you properly document those business processes on your journey map in a way that's fruitful, and you could tie it into where maybe there's a process from the business, Marta, right, that's showing this is a troublesome area. We notice that our users are struggling, but even our like internal teams are struggling, right? So again, that all leads to strategic outputs. So we'll talk about strategic output here in the end, and of course how to get buy-in, utilizing all the data, right, and be able to kind of talk about that in a very fruitful way with those tricky stakeholders. Because I apologize, guys, I'm getting a call. Should put my phone on silent. My bad. But yeah, so kind of looking at things from that standpoint, that hopefully that helps answer your question. Awesome. Turn insights into tiered action plans. So let's talk about this in a second here. So this is where most journey maps die, in the insight phase. So teams gather a ton of learnings. Everyone nods in agreement, and then nothing happens. Why? Because insight is in alignment, decision making is, right? So quick wins. Love the quick wins, right? I work at an agency. Anybody from Paysets here that's here to watch this, they know and love, hey, how can we get those quick wins and move the needle and make the client happy, but also making sure that our team is successful and moving forward, right? So in my framework, we never really stop at the problems. We look at every insight, turning them into a tiered action plan across the 3 different levels. So those quick wins, looking at improvements that take days, not months, right? Those quick wins are going to be big for the business. So these build momentum and really prove immediate return of investments. So those quick wins are going to be great. And they also are going to be like, hey, that team's awesome. They got this done. I mean, geez, they're not even done, but they're able to do this. Man, I want to work with them again, right? Gets buy-in, helps your team look nice and good, and shows that your communication and your level of leadership within kind of leading that effort for the journey mapping has been very found. So next step here is looking at those foundational fixes, right? So you built the journey map, you have this beautiful structure of all these different things, the goods, the bads, the opportunities, the different processes, right? The looping flows that might happen within those processes. So we have those foundational fixes. So what is that? Systematic gaps that create recurring pain, such as process handoffs, tool fragmentation, unclear ownership. These don't get applause, but they prevent fires, right? So making sure you're looking at, you have all this data, the quick wins, the foundational fixes, right? The stuff that's really, really, really going to be keen to, of course, helping grow that business, helping kind of accelerate growth within some of the data that you found from the journey map. And then looking at it from the last aspect here. So strategic bets. So we hear a lot about strategic research, right? And strategic research was really important, so be able to kind of rebuild approval flows, automated validation, right? So big transformative shifts, right? New branding, based on research, right? So those kind of growth, unlock new growth potentials. So these require vision, investment, and executive buy-in. So, but because they're framed against revenue, churn, and cost, they'll actually get funded, right? But again, it's like when you look at the strategic research, you need that data to back it up. That's why these journey maps are really, really fruitful, but be able to kind of approach it in a way where your stakeholders are going to nod their heads and be like, okay, I can understand why this is happening, right? And then, of course, if you have a chance doing these stakeholder presentations, maybe you're presenting a journey map, showing those pains, but if you can even show some videos of users struggling, that helps too, move the needle. So the structure does two things, right? So it gives leadership something they can green light instantly. And then it gives product and ops teams a roadmap they can actually execute. So again, we want to be able to kind of move forward effectively with the right processes and effectiveness within the journey map creation. Journey map without an action plan is just a theater, but with tiered accountability, that's what I call strategy. So let's talk a little bit about buy-in. And I know a lot of the market's really tough right now, guys, and I'll even throw this in here too. So a lot of times, in interviews, right? It's like, how do you get buy-in with tough stakeholders, right? So kind of think about that, right, as we're going through this process as well. So let's start with the truth. Like, no one's sitting around, begging for a journey map, right? Um, so looking at this, it's like product thinks they already understand the flow, right? Engineering thinks they just need better requirements. Sales, they might think they just need better pricing on things, right? Support thinks they need more headcount. So everyone's convinced their view is the correct one. So when we have all these different teams and all these different things, it's how do we kind of move forward and frame it the right way? So when you walk in to a meeting, a stakeholder meeting maybe, and say, hey, like, we need a journey map. What they hear is, oh, we need another workshop. And they kind of check out. They think that is like dragging, oh man, I don't know how to use Figma. I don't know how to use Miro. That's a conversation for another time, of course. But, so here's the move, so don't sell the artifact, sell the pain of misalignment, right? So using that pain first framing. So I don't say like we build a journey map. I say right now, support says onboarding is failing because of missing training. Sales says onboarding is failing because customers don't know what they bought. Engineering says onboarding is failing because of edge cases. We are burning 2 quarters of roadmap effort solving 3 different problems. So earlier I kind of talked about those 3 problems in a different framing, right? That really helps leadership and executives take a closer look, take a step back, and look at the framing of the problem in a much different way. So that might move a needle a little bit more for those tough stakeholders. So I hope you guys are finding some of this information fruitful. And again, it's not about creating something, it's about stopping that chaos, right? So these journey maps are here to really clear up that chaos. The journey map becomes a way out. It's not a deliverable, right? So turning skeptics into those co-creators. So the second tactic, don't try to convince skeptics. Enlist them, build them in early, like have them step in. Geez, even have them step in some of the, interview sessions if applicable, right? Depending on the situation, right? If you're going back in your early methods, through the journey maps, you're going to be mapping processes, meeting with users, having them walk through a journey. Have one of your PM sit in, have one of the engineers sit in. Seriously, like have them look at that empathy and just see like these users going through the process and listing their problems. It brings a different view to a lot of the teams who also don't understand user experience, right, or that level of empathy from those users. So if you build a journey map in isolation and you also present that to engineering or sales, they'll poke holes in it and they'll find a million things wrong, right? But if you bring them in early in the process, of course, or even like showing them, hey, this is what we have so far. Be like, hey, can you help me map out where you get pulled in? So Mara, this comes back, right, to that question you had on business process, right? So you might have an engineering team that's heavily involved in one area and product. So again, or like maybe ask them like, where do you get blocked? Like, where's your biggest problem in this process, right? Suddenly they're not critics. They're like, ooh, I like this because my life's about to get better because of this journey map, right? So we love that. We love being able to kind of improve process for all parties. So, and here's the magic rule of facilitation, right? People don't argue with models, they help create, right? So, I mean, if they're helping create the model with you, doing all the data, checking it out in the process early, well, there you go. Some of that alignment's already being fulfilled, which is fantastic. And I will say, in many of my roles, like I really try to get a lot of people involved in those journey map creations. Of course, applicable teams, right? So having the right team be in there to kind of really look at the journey map and be able to kind of provide input. So making it a living system, or it just dies on the wall. We don't want that, right? So here's the final piece that really separates impact from the theater, right? A journey map only works if it's not a one-time exercise. It has to become embedded in that like decision-making process. I find that to be really, really important. That is something that I feel has moved the needle a lot, saved a lot of companies money. In the past roles that I've worked for, it's been awesome. And even at Pace, I love the guys at Pace. They're doing a lot of great journey maps right now. Super excited about some of the clients we're working with. So again, I don't just create it, I wire it into existing rituals. So sprint planning, we're a reference to journey maps to prioritize tickets, right? Maybe using Jira. Maybe you're able to say, hey, we're journey mapping this, right? Like, how does that work? Quarterly business reviews, right? Use it to report friction pain points. So journey maps can be interesting. You'd be surprised with some of the things you can create with the journey maps. Again, making sure they're fruitful, making sure they're useful. They can take a lot of effort, right? So LOE, the level of effort can be pretty high depending on the complexity of the journey maps. It's all about what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to have? Making sure that, of course, your written statement up front is all backed, right? So backlog grooming, I talked about that, right? We're reporting those pain points and friction. So we rank tasks based on which stage they unblock. If it's not used, it's just wall art. Kind of like my Spider-Man Lego over there, even though he's pretty cool. And then, of course, it becomes governance, right? So if you have a journey map that is able to succeed and be able to kind of successfully flow and achieve all the things you're trying to figure out with the business, and you're, of course, given those taglines and doing it the right way, guess what, guys? You're in for success, you're in for happiness, and you have something that's going to work fantastic for your business and for your stakeholders. So don't sell journey mapping, sell, of course, the cost of working without one. Don't build it for teams, build it with them. And don't let it be a moment, make it be a mechanism. And that's how you turn skepticism into alignment and alignment into action. Awesome. I know that was a lot. I did my best to kind of time that and cover it in 45 minutes. I want to be able to leave this time here for questions. Please feel free to kind of put anything in the chat here. I'd love to kind of go back if anybody wants me to go back in any slides or talk about my previous experiences.
Yeah. No, Theo, I think we don't have any questions at the moment, but we're just over time. But Theo, you're going to be around the conference space so that people can ask you some questions.
Yes, I will be around.
Brilliant. I thank you, Theo, for your talk. It's been amazing. And yeah, everyone, if you can reach up to Theo and ask him anything that you want from his talk today, we would really appreciate that. And thank you, Theo, for taking the time to do the talk with Value UX.
Thank you so much, Naresh.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.